Good evening. Tonight we will read the sacred book. What secrets does it contain? Let's see. Dear Brianna, I am a lowly editor. I am not a writer, and I don't really like to read. So I've done both. A lot of both. Just for you. Let us regret it. So let's get into tonight's story. It's 1875. In America, the Civil War was over. Sorta. The West was not yet ... won ... lost. And Hawaii was still a sovereign kingdom. But while Jesse James was robbing his ass off across the Midwest. Okay, wait, hold on. William Shatner. I'm storytelling. Okay. You're right. I definitely do not want to be the Shatner. But while Jesse James was still robbing his ass off across the Midwest, across the pond, in Lemington Spa, England, Edward Alexander Crowley was born. Victorian Lemington Spa was the go-to place for something called lawn tennis, whatever that is. Turns out it's just tennis. But our little Eddie's favorite sport was magic. Yes, so I didn't know his first name was Edward. Edward Alexander Crowley. I didn't know that. In 1887, his father died, and thus began the transformation from little Eddie to what his mom Emily nicknamed
The Beast.
Emily eventually sent him off to live with her brother Tom Bond Bishop. The Beast went to this and that school, studying all sorts of fanciful subjects, much like Harry Potter, but only in like 1920? Oh, right, it says in the next line. Because read the script. In 1885, he changed his name to Aleister, the Celtic equivalent to Alexander, likely inspired by the Celtic culture revival of the times. Although he said he chose the name as it lined up with the names of famous people, pairing a dactyl with a spondy. Just some Dr. Seuss shit right here. In 1898, he left university without obtaining a degree, but his inheritance, a third of his wealthy father's estate, allowed him to traps all over Europe and Asia as a slutty poetry writing mountaineer. By 1899, Aleister Crowley was stirring things up with the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. November of that year, he purchased the Boleskine House on Loch Ness in Scotland for £2,000. Here is... Oh, finally, the story begins. Get your popcorn, everyone. Intermission. The Boleskine House, the house of 1,000 legends. There's no official record of an ancient church at the site, but there are tales of a 10th century church that caught fire, killing all its worshippers inside. A church whose ruins are thought to be under the Boleskine House. The Boleskine House was originally a hunting lodge built for Archibald Campbell Fraser in the 1760s and grew with the family over the next 70 years. According to historian John Preble, Archie was said to be an eccentric man. Archie's father was Simon the Fox Fraser, 11th Lord of the Lovat. Whoa, wait, I need that. Reverend Brianna the Mantis Lee, 13th Dactyl Spondium. I don't know what it means either, okay? Reverend Brianna the Mantis Lee, 13th Dactyl Spondy of Wicca. What even is a 13th Dactyl Spondy? So, the mantis. Did you watch my mantid video? Is that where that came from? Oh, but anyway, moving on. Archie's father, Simon the Fox Fraser, 11th Lord of the Lovat, supported the Bonnie Prince Charlie and therefore was beheaded for treason at the Tower of London in 1747. There have been reports his head can be heard rolling around in the Boleskine House. How would they know what a head sounds like? And furthermore, how would they know it was his head? Like, there's a lot of assumptions that are being made. Because his children all preceded him in death, which is a bummer, by the way, Archie passed the house to his grandson, Archibald T.F. Fraser, when he died in 1815. They just don't build names like that anymore. It's also a Fraser and Crooner Frasil. I butchered that. I'm sure that's some kind of variation of Gaelic. I don't know or understand. Or the Fraser who made circles, which is ironically like the whole premise of Frasier, the show that was on. Did you ever watch that show? And Crooner Frizzell, or the Fraser who made circles, who was the wizard responsible for reanimating corpses in the Boleskine Cemetery. The Fraser who makes circles. Anyway, who was a wizard. Anyway, so fast. I'll actually want to follow up on that because I'm like, what? The Boleskine Cemetery. In late 1672, Mr. Thomas Houston, the minister of Boleskine Church, feared for his life, and with good reason, as his predecessor was murdered, perhaps by his own parishioners. Although Thomas wrote of his fear of Lochaber Roberts, armed with naked swords and dirks, and likely also feared his congregants because of the murder. It was his battle with the wizard Fraser that tested his bravery the most. I can't. So I think Fraser and I think the show. Like, I can't. Anyway, in an account of the Kirk of Boleskine, the late Alan Dawson wrote Anne Crooner for sale, who had raised the bodies in the churchyard, and Thomas had to make haste to lay them to rest again. Nearly 100 years later, in 1762, Bishop Forbes visited Boleskine Church to witness the dead making their way above the ground yet again. Only this time, it was just bones making their way to the surface, not dancing skeletons, just bones. But like a lot of bones. Bones all over the graveyard. Bones all over the floor of the kirk. The bishop said he saw dogs running around with the bones. There's no physical indication that Boleskine Church stood at the shores of Loch Ness. Records say the church burned down in 1777. Its only remnant is the cemetery. The cemetery is populated with the graves of soldiers who died in the Jacobite Rebellion. A lot of Frasers and the minister Thomas Houston who battled the wizard. There is an escape tunnel connecting the house to the graveyard, which seems like a dark idea, or good idea. The ritual. At the time Crowley bought Boleskine House, Scotland had been a Christian stronghold for centuries. Its pagan roots, the days of barbarian clans and superstitions, a faint memory. But like all cultures forced into Christianity, some myths survive. Myths such as sea monsters. After tromping around the world from Canada to Mexico, Egypt to India, Crowley returned to Boleskine in 1904. Using his mentor and Golden Dawn founder, Samuel Mather's half-assed translation of the Book of Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage, he attempted to open a line of communication with the Holy Guardian Angel. I'm like, careful what you wish for. The book's provenance is murky, but it's said a 15th century German Jew named Abraham traveled to Egypt and met a mage, also named Abraham, that gave him some Kabbalist magical scripts. German Abe describes in the book that Egypt Abe was very courteous and kind, but also that he discussed the fear of God, like all day, every day. Nice guy, though. Egypt Abe seems the type to feed you some weird sweets while calling you little fat. So, Egypt Abe extracted a bunch of promises from German Abe, including an oath to serve and fear, before giving him the 2 manuscripts known as the Abramelin Grimoires, which contained divine science and true magic. The ritual, called the Abramelin Operation, is an exhausting ceremony said to last 6 to 18 months, using strict purity practices, prayer, and magic word squares to physically raise your inner fears and demons, allowing you then to contain them and banish them. No one had attempted in centuries because of the danger or dedication needed to complete the ritual, or perhaps the warning in the introduction to the ceremony that states no one should try it. But Crowley attempted. You know he's that kind of guy. Crowley attempted summoning the 12 kings and dukes of hell. Then, 5 months in, he abandoned the ritual after being summoned to Paris by his mentor Mathers. Strange. So, I guess we've got the 12 kings and dukes of hell running around. Having skimmed over the Testament of Solomon, which I'm pretty sure is the source for the names of Crowley's 12 kings and dukes, I only found 9 kings and 23 dukes in there, so who knows. But in the Testament of Solomon, King Solomon is having some demon troubles until Archangel Michael gives him a magic ring which Solomon can use to bring demons under his control. So all of this makes perfect sense, but the description of how he uses the ring is quite funny. I was imagining the king pointed his ring fist at a demon and zapping him or something, but he just like would throw the ring at shit, or hand it to some young man or boy and have them go throw it at a demon. Like, give Solomon a homie ball or a boomerang or something. It just seems so awkward to have to go collect the ring after, which is right. Like, it's awkward. Like, never take it off. Anyway, so looking into the names of Crowley's demons, there are a few that sparked my interest. Belial, angel who was gifted a bunch of demons by God. Leviathan, who was a sea serpent and demon, although he was also the prince of hell, not a king or a duke. And Aim, a great duke of hell who had 3 heads, 1 a serpent, and was known to set places on fire. Which now takes us back to the Boleskine House. Back to Loch Ness. And the Loch's other famous resident, the Loch Ness Monster.